Imagine you're trapped in something that's slowly killing you. A rope, a fence, a pit you can't climb out of. And then you see it approaching. Something huge, something that moves on two legs. Your entire body screams one word: predator. But the real answer to what happens next is far stranger than fear. Because somewhere in the middle of that terror, something in you might actually change. Something might recognize the difference between a threat and a rescue. And nobody, not even the scientists who study this closely, fully understands how. Start with a question. If you were an animal, trapped and dying, would you know the difference between the thing that hurt you and the thing trying to save you? Every wild animal carries something like a constant background calculation: speed of approach, direction of movement, whether eyes are locked on or looking away. That calculation happens faster than conscious thought, and the output is almost always the same: get away from the human. This isn't taught. It isn't learned through experience. Animals that have never seen a human before still run the same calculation. It's built in, inherited, passed down through however many generations it took to make human mean danger. So picture the moment an animal gets caught: a leg in a snare, a body wrapped in fishing line, a hoof stuck in mud. The physiology that follows has no real human equivalent. Cortisol floods the bloodstream. Adrenaline spikes to levels that would be dangerous if they lasted more than a few minutes. Heart rate doubles, then doubles again. Researchers who study wildlife stress have found something remarkable. Animals caught in fencing sometimes show higher stress hormone levels than animals hit by a car or shot with a gun. Being trapped, unable to move, is often more physiologically devastating than the injury itself. From the outside, this state has a specific look: pupils blown wide, muscles locked, not just tense, but frozen the way a body freezes when it's committed everything to one single outcome. Breathing goes shallow and fast. Wildlife rehabilitators have a phrase for it. They say the animal has gone somewhere else, still present in the body, but no longer processing anything except the threat in front of it. So when a human walks toward a trapped animal to help, the animal doesn't read rescuer. It reads the final phase of a hunt. This is why the thrashing often gets worse the closer the human gets. Proximity to a trapped animal means the end is near. And then, sometimes, something shifts. In December of 2005, a crab fisherman spotted a female humpback whale tangled off the coast of San Francisco. Rope wrapped around her mouth, her fins, her tail. A dozen crab traps, each nearly 100 pounds, dragging her downward, forcing her to fight constantly just to breathe. A rescue team arrived within hours. 4 divers went into the water carrying curved knives, fully aware that one reflexive movement from her tail could kill any of them instantly. She stopped moving the moment they entered the water. For over an hour, she held still at the surface while divers worked across her enormous body. At several points, she seemed to reposition herself, rotating slightly, extending a fin, as if making the ropes easier to reach. A 50-foot, 50-ton wild animal chose stillness while strangers approached her with blades. Why? Researchers point to something called threat pattern recognition. A predator closes distance fast, aggressively, in a straight line. That specific pattern is what a trapped animal's alarm system has spent millions of years learning to detect. But a human trying to help moves differently. Slowly, without sudden gestures, touching the trap, not the animal. Making none of the sounds that belong in the threat catalog. The brain searches its entire library of danger signals and comes back empty. With nothing to match, the crisis response doesn't calm down exactly. It stalls. In Yellowstone, researchers once found a wolf caught in a leg-hold trap, lunging and snapping at every approach, exactly as the biology would predict. One researcher stopped moving entirely and held steady eye contact without looking away. That detail matters more than it seems. A predator closing in for a kill rarely holds sustained eye contact. It tracks movement. It calculates. Direct, unmoving eye contact that isn't paired with aggression falls outside the wolf's threat template completely. After several minutes, the wolf stopped lunging. It sat. When the trap opened, it looked directly at the researcher, then walked calmly into the trees. Researchers describe this as a suspension of the threat response. Nothing more certain than that. The alarm system doesn't switch off. It simply loses its anchor. The expected sequence of predator behavior never arrives, so the panic has nothing left to hold on to. But here's where the story gets genuinely strange. What happens after the danger is gone? When the last rope came off that humpback whale near San Francisco, she didn't swim away immediately. She circled the divers, then surfaced beside each one individually, nudging them gently with the tip of her jaw before moving to the next. One of the divers, James Mosquito, later described it to reporters as something that felt distinctly like gratitude. Scientists are careful with that word, but it's worth knowing that humpback whales possess spindled neurons, specialized brain cells linked to empathy and rapid social decision-making. The same cells researchers John Allman and Patrick Hoff identified in humans, great apes, and elephants. For decades, scientists assumed only primates had them. Whether she used that neural architecture that afternoon is something no one can prove. But the hardware for something like it was there. Elephants tell a similar story. In Kenya, young elephants pulled from mud pits have been documented reaching out afterward, trunk to hand, trunk to arm, holding contact for several seconds before finally walking away. An elephant's trunk isn't a casual tool. It carries roughly 40,000 individual muscles and a density of nerve endings comparable to human fingertips. When an elephant extends it deliberately, that's not incidental contact. That's closer to an examination. Elephant researcher Joyce Poole has spent decades documenting just how emotionally complex these animals are. Elephants mourn their dead. They return to the bones of companions who died years earlier and touch them gently with their trunks. They recognize themselves in mirrors. The cognitive machinery required to tell the difference between a human who caused harm and one who ended it isn't something elephants appear to be missing. In some documented rescues, elephants have stayed near the humans who freed them for minutes afterward, well past the point where fleeing would make biological sense. Not grazing, not startled, just present before eventually moving on. The honest scientific answer is that nobody fully knows what's happening inside these moments. What the data shows is narrower and stranger than a simple "animals feel grateful" story. Certain animals measurably suspend their threat response around a calm, non-escalating human. And afterwards, some of them do things that serve no obvious survival purpose at all. Orienting toward the rescuer, making deliberate contact, lingering. Here's the part worth sitting with. For most of your evolutionary history, you were the predator in that equation. Every instinct a wild animal has toward humans exists because your ancestors, for thousands of generations, were exactly the threat that instinct was built to detect. And yet, in a scattering of documented moments across species as different as whales, wolves, and elephants, that ancient alarm system appears to be able to recognize something else. Not safety exactly, something closer to the absence of the pattern it was built to fear. Maybe that's the real answer here. Maybe animals don't know, in any way we'd recognize as knowing, that you're trying to help them. But something in their oldest wiring seems to notice when the thing standing over them doesn't move like the thing that hurt them. And in that gap between full-blown panic and total safety, something remarkable slips through. A moment where a 50-ton whale chooses stillness, where a wolf chooses to sit, where an elephant chooses to reach out its trunk one more time before walking away. Imagine you're trapped in something that's slowly killing you, and the thing approaching isn't what your instincts assume it is. You may never fully understand what's happening in that animal's mind in that moment, but you now know this much. Somewhere in that ancient, inherited fear, there's still room for something to shift.